characterize India as a country which is non-West, but which has an extremely strong relationship with Western countries, getting better by the day. Not everybody else necessarily in that grouping might qualify for that description, but the contribution the BRICS has made, if one looks at the G7 and how it evolved into the G20, I think in a way, those additional 13 members who came into its bigger grouping, 5 of them are BRICS members. The fact that there was another group which was meeting regularly and discussing and debating, I think certainly was an input into the expansion of the G7 into the G20. So I think we did a service to the world.
Yeah. Secretary Blinken?
I'm tempted to say what my friend said and leave it at that. Look, what we don't need to do and what we're not doing is trying to somehow design the world into rigid blocks. Each and every one of the issues that we have to deal with and deal with in the interest of the American people may have different collections and coalitions of countries that are focused on it, that bring certain experiences, certain capacities. And I think about it as variable geometry. We're putting together a puzzle with collections of countries and not just countries, organizations of different sizes and different shapes to deal with a given problem. As Jai said, we have, and of course the fact that the relationship between our countries, I would argue, is the strongest it's ever been. It makes no difference that India happens to be a leading member of BRICS. We're a leading member of the G7. We have the G20, and we have a multiplicity of things that we're doing together every single day in different ways of organizing ourselves. India and the United States working together in AUKUS, working together, in the Quad, working together in a variety of other fora. All of this goes to the point that the complexity and the multiplicity of the challenges we have demands that we find different ways to work together, and this shouldn't be done on an exclusive basis. Look, our default, of course, is to work in the first instance with fellow democracies. That's only normal and natural, but we are not only willing, we are actively working with any country that wants to solve a particular problem and wants to do so within the context of a rules-based order. That's the way we approach things.
Speaking of a rule-based order, major powers today are criticized for sort of upholding the rule-based order and upholding values in certain areas, but not in others. And a lot of people around the world, and particularly in the global south, but I would say not only in the global south, even within our Western democracies, are confused. They look at what's happening in Gaza and at the intensity of the killing, and they ask, where are human rights? Where are these Western values? I'm sure you're having here today and yesterday a lot of similar discussions, Minister Baerbock.
Yes, and they are so productive because many of them are not only speed dating, but behind closed doors, very trustfully. And I think the most important job for those who believe in a rules-based international order, be it politicians, be it journalists, be it citizens, is to not be pushed into this speed dating, into this black and white world in all our bubbles. Because easily, and this is a double standard question, yeah? If you only look, and you mentioned the situation in Gaza, if I only see the whole time on YouTube what's happening in Gaza, and I do that every second day, every day I cannot stand it because otherwise I couldn't get out of my bed anymore. Yeah, your reality is obviously the only thing what we can and have to do right now is to go in a total ceasefire to rescue these innocent children dying there every day. Yeah, so, and you're 100% right by that. But the question is to really come to this reality is to force myself, not myself, but all these persons are saying this is the moral right thing to do, to then also ask, so how do we come to that? And this is then when some might ask, so why you, German Foreign Minister, didn't call for immediate ceasefire the last months ago? Because I also looked at the other side, at the other YouTube videos, at the other bubbles, yeah, where I saw 4 days after the 7th of October, I didn't even see it, I spoke to the father whose wife and 2 little girls had been kidnapped by terrorists from Hamas. I saw the video where women have been not only raped, but murdered afterwards. And in that moment, for me, it was clear, again, that we can also not only relate to the past, saying, okay, we know how negotiations with terrorists are working, because if you saw that video and if you were ready to see these women suffering there, you understand that this is not only a military logic, because those people who are doing this, raping a woman and killing her afterwards, they don't want to exchange soldiers or political prisoners. They enjoy slaughtering women. I'm saying that because I think this is really important, bringing it down to the people, because then you understand in this kind of situation, how do we come now to a ceasefire? That the release of hostages, the release of these women is crucial, because otherwise we can never save the children in Gaza. So this comes all back to what my dear colleague Zhishenko has said. If we're not capable of stepping out of right or wrong, yes or no, black or white, we will, in this world of dilemmas, never do what our job, I would say, the 3 of us here, is to do all the best to rescue people. And this is why we have been working so intensively with those partners, Arab partners, in the last 3 months, to see how we can come together for the most important point right now, freeing the hostages, having a humanitarian pause to bring in humanitarian support into Gaza, and not stopping, even though the headlines are there every day, you cannot fix it anyhow. I think the biggest favor for those who do not care for human rights and the international order is that we are giving up, and that we are not being ready to look at these different topics from our different side. And this is why, at least for me, I would say for all the 3 of us, use our competences, use our channels we are having. And there's, again, diversity is beneficial. If we are not all the same, but if we are trying to solve this horrible war in the Middle East from our different perspectives, then we can also bring security both for the people in Israel and the people in Gaza.
I have to say, I fully subscribe to everything that Anna-Lena said. And I think as people in positions for a brief period of time of responsibility, but also, and maybe foremost, as human beings, as mothers, fathers, children, brothers and sisters, we're intensely driven to try to prevent or stop human suffering, including the suffering of men, women, and children in Gaza. The question is how to do it most effectively, and how to take account of the incredible complexity that Anna-Lena just outlined so well. But there's another element to this that we have a responsibility to do something about. The greatest poison in our common well is dehumanization. And we see that in all directions. And if you lose sight of the humanity of someone else, then your heart is hardened to a point where anything is acceptable and anything is possible. Part of our responsibility is to do what we can to push back, to avoid, to call out dehumanization wherever it's coming from, in whatever direction. Because if we can't get at that, it's very hard, if not impossible, to do other things.
One of the criticism that I think, I'm sure you hear a lot is U.S. policy has, of course, shifted in the last couple of months, but yet you want the fighting to stop, but there is no sign whatsoever that you're not willing to send weapons to Israel, for example. So that also confuses people. You know, when they look at the rhetoric versus the action, what would you say to that?
Well, first, we're committed to Israel's security. That's been clear from day one. it remains clear. And we understand and support the proposition that Israel has to find ways to make sure that what happened on October 7th never happens again. So we start there. But we've also said, and not only said, we've acted on the proposition that, of course, the way Israel does that matters profoundly. The way it does it in terms of trying to ensure greater protection for civilians who are caught in a crossfire of Hamas's making. That's absolutely essential. Making sure that people in need get the assistance they need. We are working on this every single day. And as we've seen this evolve over the last 4 months, things have happened as a result of our engagement, our intervention, that I would say probably would not have happened, almost certainly wouldn't have happened without it. But it's not enough. It's insufficient. And that's why we're at it almost literally 24 hours a day.
May I add something on that?
Yes, sure.
Because for the full picture, and this is what we are discussing, and this is a good thing, in these horrible times I'm always trying to see the glimpse of hope at the horizon. The good thing is that over the last 3 months, all these discussions were helpful in a way. First, we didn't have any humanitarian support. Now we have at least a few trucks, not enough trucks, but also from the other understanding, and this is why I totally agree with the security guarantees for Israel. You cannot just say we need a ceasefire and the Israeli government, the IDF has to stop, and then we just wait and see what happens to the regrouping of Hamas. No, we have to give an answer to both legitimate security concerns. So our part of discussion is, for example, in the north. If people go back to the north, how do we, as an international community, secure that Hamas is not regrouping there, misusing against civilians as human protection shield? And this is also part of our common international security response.
Minister Jayankant, what is the view from India? What would you, if you had some advice for your colleagues, what would you tell them?
Well, I don't have advice for my colleagues, though I think all of us follow the enormous efforts which Tony is putting in right now. Look, the way we look at it, there are different dimensions, different elements to this. Number one, we must be clear that what happened on October 7th was terrorism. No caveats, no justification, no explanation. It was terrorism. Number two, as Israel responds, it is important that Israel should have been very mindful of civilian casualties, that it has an obligation to observe international humanitarian law. Number three, the return of hostages is today imperative. Number four, there is a need for a humanitarian corridor, a sustainable humanitarian corridor to provide relief. And eventually, there has to be a permanent fix, a long-term fix, otherwise we're going to see a recurrence. And I think today, certainly India has long believed in a two-state solution. We have maintained that position for many decades. And I think today many more countries in the world today feel not just that the two-state solution is necessary, but it is more urgent than it was before.
Let me take a couple of questions. I think there's a gentleman there, and then there, and there. Okay, three. Let's take all three questions. Actually, we'll take 4 questions very quickly.
4 is here?
Yes, 4 is there.
Natalie Tocci, Rome. A question, in fact, both to Secretary Blinken and to Foreign Minister Baerbock. I mean, the logic of the argument of being somewhat reticent on pushing for a ceasefire, as far as I understand, is basically that of saying, well, one needs to make sure that what happened on the 7th of October does not happen again. And so the question that I ask you is,